Welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast, addressing all aspects of the digital enterprise, inspiring connection without boundaries and creation without limits. Thank you for tuning in. Here are your hosts, Thom Singer and Craig Brown.
Hey there, and welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Thank you so much for coming along on the journey of this show that we designed to be a resource for those who work in and around product lifecycle management. The Digital Enterprise Society is the forum for the exchange of ideas surrounding the tools, processes, and practices used across the product lifecycle. To learn more, visit our website, digitalenterprisesociety.org. And my name is Thom Singer, and for the last 2.5 years, I have had the honor to co-host this show with Craig Brown. Craig is an industry veteran and former PLM leader at General Motors. And today, Craig is back in the seat of one of the battlers for our digital battles that we have between Craig and Mark Pendergast. Now, Mark is the trustee for content for the Digital Enterprise Society, and both Mark and Craig have really long histories working in and around product lifecycle management. And today, we are going to talk about, will PLM or ALM drive the future of product lifecycle management? And ALM standing for Application Lifecycle Management. And Craig actually started his career on that side of the fence. So it's going to be fun to hear them kind of have a talk. So Craig, Mark, welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast.
Good to be here, Thom.
Hey, thanks, Thom. Good to see you, Mark.
Good to see you, Craig.
I love it when we have these battles because I learned so much about how we work in the digital enterprise, listening to the two of you go back and forth. And so today we're just going to jump right in. Craig, I'm going to start with you because everybody doesn't know what ALM actually means. So why don't you define that for us and give us a little framework, and then we'll let you guys battle it out.
Okay. So everybody has a phone or a handheld device now that has a bunch of applications on it. And you know, back in the day when Mark and I were youngsters, this term application was barely used. I'm talking about over 2.5 decades ago. However, we all kind of know what an app is, right? We even shorten the word. We say, hey, I got an app for my phone. So that application lifecycle management is the management of an application that gets delivered to you as a customer that has a life. Sometimes the life is a few weeks because it's a quick app and you throw it away. Sometimes you keep it forever. Like, you know, it's your favorite way of chatting with your friends, right? Those are all applications. Lifecycle management's just like product lifecycle management. It's the management of it over time. So that's what it is. And, you know, I helped, and Mark knows this because it was in his part of the company at General Motors. But, you know, the way I got to General Motors was bringing tools that develop software, i.e. applications, that go onto a product, in particular a car. And so this is a long time ago, everybody. This is like 1990. And so the point was, I didn't know I was in ALM. The guys that told me I was in ALM was the PLM guys. And I'm like, well, who declared you guys king and made you the people that owned everything? Well, you know, that's another community, and they did own everything. And they were partly, it's product lifecycle management. But what that really drove was manufacturing efficiency. And so they took over the term PLM, and because it had so much capital involved, because it was producing a car, right? That became kind of a very clear definition to everybody. Whereas this word application, like all software, it's abstract. It's hard to put your hands on. And so, anyways, these two terms developed, and in my career, you know, another decade later, they went back and forth. And so this question that Mark posed that we're going to debate a bit about is, you know, how did this become a battleground? Well, one's driven by consumer demand for new products, new cars. The other's driven by consumer demand for new services, applications. Oh, so is there really a battle, or is it just a lot of confusion that you got to bring some sense to? Anyways, as you introduced, I ended up as the PLM leader of General Motors, even though I was the application dude that brought tools and stuff to the business. So I find it interesting to this day, this debate goes on. And I think it would be good for you guys to hear the debate a little bit. Which one, well, I shouldn't say win or lose, but which one's on top? Which one drives? Well, at the end of the day, it's all about what the consumers want. And maybe this will give you a part of the answer as we get into the debate here. So anyways, that's what it is. And that's why it's related to PLM, is because the PLM guys didn't like the application guys, and so they gave us a name. They called us ALM.
So Mark, anything you want to add to Craig's definition and his history there?
No, it'd be hard to add to that pile of information, but I think...
Thanks for calling it a pile, Mark.
But no, I think ALM is perceived as being newer, although we've been doing it for a while. We've been doing PLM for centuries. We've been doing ALM for decades. So I guess PLM is the older one. And
what's funny about this is ALM managing builds of software and doing it in an organized way and structured way and so on. 1989 was the first time we all did that in the car business in a robust tool set. When was the first PDM tools? I'm just going to make a point.
Yeah.
95, 97, 98, something like that. I think ALM's older than PLM, but anyways.
All right. So I'll toss this out to you to get started, and either one of you can jump in here. So is it going to be a systems limitation or a management limitation that prevents hardware from running at the speed of software?
Well, I guess I'll take a crack at this one. I think one of the big challenges we've got right now is that hardware is required to move atoms around, and the application people only move electrons around. And I tell you what, given my druthers, I'd rather move a pile of electrons around. They're pretty light, and they move pretty quick. And I think this is the challenge for people building products is, as we have matured the ALM and the software technologies, they have gone faster and faster and faster and have really been able to focus on their quality at speed. And the hardware guys, we thought we were doing that until we looked over the wall at the software guys and said, holy cow, they are moving so fast. And why is that? And I think that's something that everybody struggles with today, is how to increase that velocity of hardware development to match the software development. And I think, to me, it's a combination of the two. I think the PLM systems we have cause an inherent lag just because of the way they're architected and the way they grew up kind of organically from CAD vaulting, which was the original kind of application, to trying to be a full PLM. So the PLM, the philosophy, and PLM, the tool, are not running at the same level, and that's a problem. But PLM, the tool, causes inefficiencies because it's not architected as a whole like ALM. I think, on the other hand, management grew up building hardware, and they don't. The senior leadership doesn't understand the speed differential, and they're just now promoting people into those positions that actually say this is a problem, rather than, well, this is normal. What are you talking about?
Yeah, that's a good thing. I introduced the PLM constraint as a manufacturing constraint. You just called it CAD vaulting. If you look at why CAD vaulting, it was for stability to manufacturing, right? Because somebody was asking some plant to invest tens of millions of dollars to make a new piece of sheet metal look like a fender, right? So that's what drove management, was CapEx investment. And all the computers did was make it easier, right? Make it faster, make it more robust. The software evolution has been a completely different evolution, right? And it isn't, it is constrained by investment. It's investment in people, right? but it's not the constraint of, I got to go get the bank to give me a lot of money so that I can go, dig up some ground and build a new plant. The plants in ALM are all virtual. That's why software companies can stay in business while we all work at home, right? There really isn't any difference in their work environment other than maybe collaboration with a peer. So it is capital driven, meaning investments, and then all the management techniques around financial management, right? The management that doesn't have that software background you talked about, they struggle with how to quantify the finance side of of ALM. They really don't get it, other than increased sales. If the application brings more revenue, they get that. But the whole investment side, it's not well understood. There's a growing discipline there, but it's not well understood. So if people can think about the history, what drove PLM, CAD welding for manufacturing stability, what drove ALM, flexibility in the marketplace? Mostly because you can. The electrons are almost zero weight compared to the atoms, which have electrons in them, but the atoms are heavier. So they take energy to move them around, right? So really good analogy, Mark. I like that.
Yeah. So I don't know. I guess the question still didn't get answered, which is, what really is driving that speed of hardware? And I think some of it's just inertia.
Yeah,
it's good enough. Management expectation is that it's slow.
Yeah, no, you're right, but it's financial inertia. It's just the practices we've developed, right?
Now, I was surprised the other day. I was digging through our documentation on the new SPICE compliance and things like that, and I read the chapter on SPICE for hardware. So it's starting to leak across the wall and say, you guys got to be correct by construction. You need to dot all the I's and cross all the T's. I think initially that's going to slow down the hardware guys, but I think it's an enabler for them to go faster later.
Yeah, they don't know how to do construction. How'd you phrase that? It's a really good phrase.
That's a Siemens phrase, correct by construction.
Okay, so think about that. How do hardware guys develop products? It's sloppy, everybody. They build it and they break it. They build it and they break it. They take it for a drive. They break it. They do it again and again. And they keep finding issues and they keep fixing them, right? These guys in autonomous vehicles, there's a famous quote from a Toyota executive about it'll take 8 billion miles of testing before we can field an autonomous vehicle. That's too expensive. Well, that's just a wrong way to think about the problem. If you brought the Agile Manifesto and the continuous validation that you get from ALM, now all of a sudden continuous validation is like, you can do that? I didn't even know that was possible, right? And so the hardware guys will get faster when they embrace these other principles, and as opposed to build it, break it, and that mindset.
Well, and especially, I think we talked about this in one of our other battles, is as they embrace digitalization, you can build it, break it in the electrons.
Yeah, thousands of times.
Thousands of times, every way you can break it, take it to limits you could never take a real physical vehicle to.
Yeah. And
I think that's going to help speed them up. But if I have to put the final blame on someone, I think it's got to be management, because when management has the expectation that hardware will be fast at high quality, then they will find a way to do it. And right now, I don't think they have that expectation. They just say, well, hardware's hardware. It's good enough. We've been making money. The only people that worry about that are people that are ready to go out of business because they doing it really bad.
Yeah, right. Which you and I in our own ways experienced, right? We did have leadership that got it and said, oh gosh, I got to embrace the virtual approaches, whether they're application-based or product-based. And, I like the way you said that. It's really how, at the end of my career, these things got merged, at least where I work. They got merged, right? And so when we talked about ALM, we would talk about it in terms of, well, what makes it unique from the management practices for products? And then that uniqueness drove new parts of the company, right? The way we managed it in the 1990s when we started completely changed. And that next generation of leaders that are now in charge, well, they get it. But we were the ones that trained them that they had to think that way. So it's pretty cool.
Hey, so before we go on to the next question, Mark said something that I thought might be worth for some of the listeners a little bit of a clarification of what he meant by that. And that was, Mark, you referred to PLM the philosophy versus PLM the tool. And that made me sit up and go, ooh, I want to know more about that. So can you guys touch on the difference between the philosophy and the actual tool when we're talking about PLM? And does that apply to ALM as well?
Okay. Well, I think it is a good question, and it's one that most people don't understand the difference between. But the philosophy of PLM is I'm going to manage my product stream into the marketplace from womb to tomb, every function, everything that touches it. And it includes ALM if ALM is your product. But it includes finance. It includes how do I procure these things? How do I find sources to give me parts? How do I do all these things? My relationship with the customer to get new products. PLM, the tool, grew up organically. So it was CAD vaulting because nobody could figure out what was in the designer's head from 2D drawings, and there was too many errors being built. So they said, hey, we got this new way to represent things more realistically, but now we don't have paper to put in the paper vault. We got to have an electronic vault. And that's where the investment first came in. And then they kind of bolted on bits and pieces of, well, now I need to change it. So I'm going to bolt on change management. And, I got electronics guys. So I'm going to bolt on some electronic stuff. And, I probably ought to keep track of requirements. So I'm going to bolt that on. And, I got to fix these things out in the field. I'm going to bolt that on. So it was never architected from the vision of PLM. It was architected from a very specific managing flat file, binary files for CAD. ALM, on the other hand, although it is a subset of philosophical PLM, ALM tools were architected to the ALM philosophical vision. So they built all the pieces and they made them all work and they made them all flow so that they get a lot more productivity, quality, all that stuff because it's an all-encompassing system. If you look at the average PLM tool today, well, you can buy the base PLM tool, but then you got to buy all 50 add-ons to even take a crack at the philosophy. So I think that's the big difference there is the philosophy says everything is PLM. If you're a manufacturing company, you're doing PLM. The reality of it is the implementation grew up from the grassroots and it's never achieved the promise. Craig, what do you think?
And the guys in ALM, the guys in application, the guys building software, they would agree with everything you just said, Mark. And then they would say, and you wanted us to wait on you? And no offense, but we're just going to go ahead and do what we've been doing. And we'll have a reference in our release system to what version of hardware we go on. But we're not going to slow down to your frequency, your cycle rate, because we can't. Somebody else in this crazy software business is going to beat us if we slow down at all. So we won't slow down, but we'll build loose linkages. And so this has been a big debate about, is ALM tightly integrated to PLM or vice versa? And it's been interesting debate. There's not a right answer from what I can tell, but there's not a clear answer either.
So that leads into the next question, and that is, will PLM and ALM merge into a combined approach, or do you think they're going to stay separate?
Well, Craig, you're the ALM guy. What do you think? Am I going to take you over? Or
they're merging slowly. Well, no, they're merging slowly. I'm, live radio, everybody. We're experiencing a torrential downpour in Michigan, so I apologize for the background noise. But it's going to be a necessary thing. If PLM, the way you said it, PLM philosophy. If we're doing PLM, which we will, by the way, with Internet of Things and data collection and improving products, we need PLM for that. Then ALM will have to be a part of it. But don't ever ask the application guys to slow down, because they won't. They need something. I think Siemens and a couple of the other big vendors, they've been acquiring ALM vendors, mostly because they got the money, but secondly, because they realize actually it's really different. And whether it's Mark or Craig or somebody else pointing it out, it really is different. And so you can't expect one vaulting solution to satisfy both camps. It just won't.
Well, I guess I'll go the other way and say the effort to get to the combined solution is going to be the same effort that ALM already did once. And that is, you're going to have to work from the top down, from the PLM philosophy, and architect a system that end to end, womb to tomb, top to bottom, does PLM. And at that point, it'll be ALM, PLM. It'll be the whole thing. But most of these vendors that I've seen rest on their laurels. They're happy with the CAD Vaulting Plus, and I don't think they have the vision that they really want to do all of PLM. They're buying all the pieces, but they're not architecting it to be a whole. They're architecting it to be a jigsaw puzzle. And I think that is That is the limitation that's going to prevent them from coming together.
And it's a jigsaw puzzle. They make you pay by the piece rather than pay for the whole puzzle, right? That's part of the problem is the business practice over there.
So I think they will come together. Somebody is going to be innovative enough. And it's hard because anybody that comes up that looks like they're innovative enough to get it done, they get bought by one of the big guys and then shoved on the back shelf.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to take some intestinal fortitude on the part of somebody, either one of the big guys who's not motivated to do it or some up-and-comer that stays private long enough not to get bought, to take that architectural vision of the combined system that does product lifecycle management. You know, I talk about capital PLM and little PLM. Somebody needs to build the system that does capital PLM. And right now, all we got is the little PLMs.
Well, that's because the capital PLM is products and the little PLM is parts, right?
Yeah.
That's the problem is what's the P mean? We've had this debate before with other people, but
I agree. It's like GM back in the old days, right? You just take any body and slap some chrome on it, they'll buy it, right? So you take any CAD Vaulter, slap a little chrome on it. Hey, these guys will line up to buy it.
We'll have to get the people are going to have to get their history books out. The X body cars, everybody. That was a while ago. So Mark, I agree with you. I actually think it's really hard to be one solution provider. So this point about will one consume the other, I actually think they're going to figure out an ecosystem where they cohabitate because they'll have to. Within the big aerospace companies, they're figuring out that, like it or not, the big kids, CATIA and NX, have got to work together. And whether it be Team Center or something else being the management of it all, they got to work together because they just can't get their supply chains to agree on one tool chain. So it's unlikely they'll agree on one set of suppliers, right? I think the same thing's happening in ALM. Ask Apple what they do for their application environments. Well, first, they outsource a heck of a lot of it to individual developers. And second, they sure as heck don't manage the hardware. I mean, they have a hardware design, but somebody else mass produces it all. So what's my point? The tools don't need to be integrated to be really successful. They just don't need to be. And so that may not happen. That's hard for an industrial company to accept, right? One that's been doing business for 100 years, because it's a really different business model. But they're figuring out whether they follow Apple or somebody else.
So that transitions into another question, and that is, what does the solutions look like in the future for PLM and ALM, and what are your predictions? Where do you think we're going?
Okay, well, I'll take a crack at that one, and I'm going to go off in a third direction, maybe, just to keep it interesting. But one of the things that's caught my attention, and I think might be the future of all of this, is yet another acronym, which is BPM. And that's business process management. And right now it's just kind of at the noise level. But what it is basically a tool that coordinates your business process and what we call orchestrates everything that's going on underneath in all the other systems. So it basically sits on top and it'll talk to your PLM and it'll talk to your ALM and it'll talk to your ERP. And it looks from a pure process standpoint as you're going through PLM, and whatever tool or person or process it needs to run to get that to happen, it just reaches out in the environment. So instead of you swivel chairing back and forth between all these systems trying to figure out what's going on, BPM shields you from that and kind of puts like a web front end on it, where whatever you need comes to the screen, you make your decision and you move on. It's very agile, very flexible, because it's not worried about the details of what you're doing, because it's just talking to the underlying systems to make that happen. And I think something like that, where it would be a generic workflow manager sitting on top of ALM and PLM, could provide those integration points and make it look like one system, even though it's not. In fact, I'm waiting for the first PLM company to go out and buy a BPM company, and there's plenty of them out of there.
Yeah, Mark, that's excellent. I don't have anything to add. I agree with that. What little I still dabble here in semi-retirement, that topic comes up more and more. And in fact, there's a discussion going on about how do you know your product is safe? well, we certify it through your business processes. And when I first heard that, I'm like, really? And then the more I think about it, I'm like, well, that actually is how we do material science, right? Our processes for getting the raw materials, making sure it has the right properties so that I can mass produce. I mean, it's been done before, is my point, everybody. So business process modeling that includes the business will then include everything: products, applications, service notes, all of it. It'll be great.
All right. So as we wrap this up, though, I have one more question for you. And that is, Craig, you started off today's explanation. You said, well, back in the day when Mark and I were youngsters. So all of us have to think in the way back machine for that.
That's
back.
Right. I got gray hair.
Back.
Actually, I have less hair.
So if you could go back to the early stages of your careers, going back, 3+ decades, 4 decades, do you think that we moved along as fast as you would have thought we would have back in the 80s? If you were to look forward, do you think we're beyond where you thought we would have been? Or do you think, wow, we came up shorter than I thought we would have been in this whole world of PLM and, of course, ALM?
Well, I'm pretty optimistic that we came as fast as we can. And, maybe a slight detour was personal computing, because it put a lot of power in your hands, but it kind of broke good configuration management and closed loop change control because everybody could do their own thing. But these tools, that we've been talking about, and the philosophy of the systemic view from the top, there's pretty powerful open source tools today. So relatively free if you want to do the effort to build it yourself. So the cost is the time to build it. But those tools are awfully powerful. And so open source has kind of been the motivator, the governator, the way which has kept everybody honest, and then markets react to it. At first people say, oh, I don't want open source. And then people say, I can't live without open source. And so it's kind of interesting how it all comes together. I think it's about the right pace. I don't think it could have been faster, frankly. And it's driven by money, right? And where's the money flow? Well, if applications bring value, then the money's going to flow that direction, right?
Well, I guess I agree and disagree with Craig. I think certainly, as I mentioned earlier, one of the biggest factors has been we've had to retire generations of management in order to make some of these things go. I remember telling some people that were just very frustrated on one of these digitalization projects, your chief engineer grew up on a drafting board and has no concept of the complexity of their products or what it takes to get them out the door at the levels of quality. I mean, they were producing products at 90% quality and they were happy, and we're trying to do it at 2 parts per million and saying, why aren't we checking parts per billion? Because we're running out of numbers, it's getting so small. So I think it has moved at the pace that management would allow it to move. And it's moved at the pace, as Craig said, that the vendors aren't going to go invest in something that's so futuristic that nobody's going to buy it. So I think those have been the limiting factors on both sides. Is you can only go so fast when there's, when you got people in charge that don't even understand what you're doing. And we're still there today. Even the SPICE compliance ALM, most of our leaders grew up in hardware and they understand CAD now. So that's great. But, they have no idea how you get to less than 0, parts per million. I mean, it's we're starting to go to parts per billion and saying, I got to drive that down. And so I think that's really where we are, is that there's so many opportunities where we could have gone faster. But again, you got the leadership saying, oh, it's too risky, or we don't need it, or we're doing fine the way we are because I grew up on drafting boards and it was fine for me. And you got the vendors saying, why am I going to cannibalize this great business that I've got, when putting all this new stuff out there? I'm just going to kind of ride this train, as fast as the other guys will buy it.
I mostly agree, Mark. And, the last point, Thom, this is the great thing about capitalism. If you're in there working for a company with the management that doesn't want to embrace change like that, go find another company, because there's somebody out there doing it and they're going at all kinds of speeds. So, look at the Fortune 50, look at the number of changes, look who's on top. those guys have applications, a lot of applications. And so that's especially if you're younger in your career, don't get frustrated by people that don't want to take the risk. Just go work for another company. There's plenty of them out there.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I learned so much from these digital battles, and I know that everyone who listens does as well. So we look forward to the next one. Thank you both for being here. And thank you to everybody who tuned in and listened, because, every week, Craig and I try to bring to this podcast interesting interviews and discussions that are going to help everybody enhance and grow their careers. And we want you to join us every single week for more thoughts, ideas, and information in and around product lifecycle management. And always remember that the Digital Enterprise Society is the place for the exchange of ideas around digital manufacturing tools. You're always welcome to check out the website at digitalenterprisesociety.org.
You've been listening to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Learn more about what you've heard here today at digitalenterprisesociety.org. Join us again next week for more connection without boundaries and creation without limits.